Hundreds of books have been written about the tragic and destructive union of Diana Spencer and Prince Charles, and films and TV series have been made about it. However, another, no less important aspect often remains behind the scenes of this drama. Few people think about the fact that this toxic marriage dealt a devastating blow not only to the Waleses themselves, but also to the strongest relationship in modern British history, the long-lasting union of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. In the marriage of the monarch and the Duke of Edinburgh, roles were always assigned with military precision. They made this unspoken pact even before their lavish wedding in 1947. Yes, Lilibet would one day wear the crown and become the sovereign for millions of subjects. But behind closed doors of their home, Philip would be the unquestionable head of the family and the unassailable authority. To Her Majesty's credit, she faithfully kept this promise for decades. However, the chaotic, emotional, and sometimes completely incomprehensible behavior of their daughter-in-law, Diana Spencer, ruthlessly violated this marriage contract. The conflict between the Waleses triggered one of the deepest and most painful rifts within the royal couple, forcing Elizabeth and Philip to go through a serious crisis in order to save their trust in each other. When Diana first crossed the threshold of the royal residences as a potential bride, she was only 19 years old. Behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, two influential families, the Windsors and the Earls of Spencer, whose grandmother, incidentally, had been a lady-in-waiting to the Queen Mother herself, tacitly decided to unite their dynasties. Charles and Diana hadn't even announced their engagement yet, but the young lady was already spending weekends at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, successfully passing the royal family's famous test. She accompanied the heir on the royal yacht Britannia and spent the Christmas holidays at Sandringham. Clearly, the august relatives were favorably disposed towards this shy girl. "She is one of us," Elizabeth II wrote with unconcealed admiration to one of her confidants. "I am completely captivated by all three girls from the Spencer family." Prince Philip also made no secret of his satisfaction. Diana, it seemed to him, genuinely laughed at his rather sharp jokes, demonstrated impeccable manners at the dinner table, spoke knowledgeably about horses and hunting dogs, and generally said only what people wanted to hear. To the conservative Philip, she seemed like the ideal, unspoiled match for Charles, the complete opposite of the experienced and married Camilla Parker Bowles, whose relationship cast a shadow on the crown's reputation. All that remained was to wait for their indecisive son to finally buy the ring. However, Charles was stalling for time. Meanwhile, the British press literally went mad. Paparazzi were following the kindergarten teacher closely, keeping an eye on her apartment in Earl's Court, blocking her way on the street, and placing bets on the wedding date. Diana's face graced the front pages of all the morning newspapers. What was supposed to be a quiet family anticipation turned into media frenzy, and young Spencer became its unwilling hostage. Such aggressive media attention could not fail to alarm the Queen. The situation required an immediate resolution, but in the royal family, it had not been customary for generations to have frank, heart-to-heart conversations with children. Avoiding a direct conflict, Elizabeth entrusted her husband with resolving this issue. Philip, as a true patriarch, acted with military resolve. He did not speak to his son in person. Avoiding emotions was in the blood of the Windsors. Instead, he acted in the typical manner of old-school British aristocrats. He wrote Charles a harsh letter. In it, he stated that the girl's reputation was suffering, and the Prince of Wales needed to either propose to her or back off. Charles's friends later recalled the despair with which he received his father's message. The prince regarded it as a harsh ultimatum and coercion to marry. However, Charles, whose heart still belonged entirely to Camilla, could hardly think clearly. Biographers who read that very letter claim it was a stern but fair fatherly advice, not an order to lead Diana to the altar. On July 29, 1981, the wedding of the century took place, watched live by around 750 million people around the world. Diana suddenly became the most popular and beloved member of the royal family. But behind the fairy tale facade lay a grim reality. Trapped within the walls of Kensington Palace, the Princess of Wales suffered from loneliness, postpartum depression, and bulimia. Charles, unable to provide her with the emotional support she needed, increasingly sought solace in conversations with Camilla. At the same time, in public, the newly minted princess invariably charmed her subjects with her sincerity, breaking all conceivable protocols. She hugged the sick, knelt before children, and looked people straight in the eye. The deeper the emotional chasm between Diana and Charles became, the more unpredictable her behavior became. And Elizabeth and Philip, who were accustomed to hiding their feelings behind a mask of duty, never complain, never explain, turned out to be completely unprepared for this. "Be patient, and everything will be fine," the Queen advised her tearful daughter-in-law dryly. These were the terse words of a woman from the era of World War II, who didn't understand the psychological torment of modern times. Nevertheless, Elizabeth tried to protect Diana on her own level. When paparazzi captured a pregnant princess in a bikini in the Bahamas, the Queen personally summoned the tabloid editors to Buckingham Palace and reprimanded them, without uttering a single word of reproach to Diana. The Duke of Edinburgh, who was well aware of how difficult the role of a second fiddle would be for the future monarch, took on the role of a negotiator. He wrote long, supportive letters to his daughter-in-law, in which he tried to explain the specifics of the royal duty, and affectionately signed them Papa. The efforts of the older generation, which had united in defense of Diana and against their own troubled son, proved futile. Offended by her husband's infidelities, the princess went on the offensive. Everything was put into play: secret cooperation with journalists, leaks of information to the press, social outings that overshadowed Charles, and her own romantic affairs on the side. Elizabeth and Philip stoically tried to mend the broken vase until the catastrophic year of 1992 arrived, which the Queen herself would later call Annus Horribilis, the terrible year. Andrew Morton's sensational book, Diana, Her True Story, was published. Elizabeth and Philip read excerpts from it with unconcealed horror. All the secrets came to light: Charles's infidelities, Diana's suicide attempts, her eating disorder. The unshakable British monarchy received a treacherous stab in the back from the very person it was supposed to protect. After this scandal, the Duke of Edinburgh's patience finally and irrevocably ran out.
If Elizabeth,
guided by her duty as a sovereign, continued to seek compromises and tried to preserve at least the appearance of marriage for the sake of the crown's stability. Then Philip launched an open offensive. From then on, he never missed an opportunity to harshly criticize Diana within the aristocratic circle. "Be honest and admit to yourself," he wrote in fury to his sister-in-law, changing his tone from gentle to icy. "Charles's relationship with Camilla is nothing compared to how you behave." A real Cold War unfolded between Philip and Diana. He would demonstratively leave the room when she entered. In response, Diana would share her paranoid fears with her friends, insisting that her father-in-law hated her so much that he was ready to organize an assassination attempt. It was here that the marriage of the monarchs themselves began to crack. Philip was furious that Elizabeth was delaying, not giving permission for the official divorce of the Waleses. Day after day, he demanded that this Gordian knot be cut, pleading with his wife to show some firmness. But Elizaveta, in a stubborn manner completely uncharacteristic of her, refused to listen to her husband. For 3 long years, they were on opposite sides of the barricades. She was trying to save the status quo, while he demanded surgical intervention. Diana, unwittingly, drove a wedge between people who had previously been inseparable for more than 40 years. The climax came at the end of 1995, when the Princess of Wales gave a scathing interview to the Panorama program on the BBC, uttering the famous phrase, "In this marriage, there were 3 of us, and I don't like crowds." The Queen was shocked, but, as usual, she tried to smooth things over by confirming Diana's invitation to the traditional Christmas at Sandringham. Diana declined. This was the last straw. The courtiers whispered that the enraged Philip had literally forced Elizabeth to sit at the oak table and demanded that she immediately write official letters to Charles and Diana, ordering them to divorce. The divorce took place. Diana left the court, but Philip never forgave her for the damage she had inflicted on his family and his relationship with his wife. The story might have had a different ending if Lady Di's life had not ended on that tragic night in 1997 in the Parisian tunnel of the Alma. However, we can understand how events might have unfolded further by looking at another problematic daughter-in-law of the Windsors, Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York. Sarah, the wife of Prince Andrew, the Queen's favorite son, was a close friend of Diana's, but the complete opposite of her in temperament. The mischievous, loud, and cheerful red-haired wild one initially charmed the court, but the idol collapsed 4 years later. While Andrew was away on sea voyages, Sarah was increasingly seen in the company of other men. In 1992, a monstrous scandal erupted. Tabloids published photos from a villa in the south of France, where financial advisor John Bryan was kissing the toes of a topless duchess who was sunbathing. Philippe's reaction was swift and merciless. "You belong in a nunnery or in a madhouse," he told Sarah, permanently erasing her from his life. His strategy remained unchanged: absolute boycott and exile. Another interesting point. After the divorce of the Dukes of York in 1996, Elizabeth II, unlike her husband, eventually warmed up to her former daughter-in-law. She appreciated that Sarah remained a devoted mother to Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, and never slurred the monarchy in the press the way Diana did. However, the Queen never dared to engage in an open conflict with Philip, who had strictly vetoed Fergie's presence in the royal residences. When Elizabeth wanted to have tea with Sarah, she would turn into a conspirator. After waiting until her husband's car disappeared behind the gates of Windsor Castle, she would personally call the Duchess. "Philip has left. This is your chance. Come quickly." Of course, the shrewd Duke of Edinburgh was well aware of his wife's secret tea parties. He simply turned a blind eye to it, and perhaps this is precisely the secret of their great union. Elizabeth and Philip were married for 73 years, weathering global crises, the fall of an empire, and scandals involving their own children. Having gone through the fire of palace intrigues and family dramas, they perfectly mastered the main art of any strong family, the art of great compromise.